So, Peebs, as the Zelda aficionado in the room, I love Zelda, but I think this is like your franchise, and I think I wanna talk to you about just Zelda art styles in general, because that's such a big part of the series. You know, like every game these days has, well, not every game, but you know, like it's kind of like each era of Zelda, it seems, has a completely distinct art style.
For the most part.
And I feel like it kind of goes back and forth between, like, oh, you know, you have Toon Link style with Wind Waker, and that's like the most used Zelda art style by far. But then you have some variants of that where it's like the Link, like, what do you consider like a Link to the Past and Link Between Worlds to be? I don't know if that's like the same art style. It's kind of like, it's kind of like an evolution of the Link to the Past art style, but it's kind of its own vibe. There's a lot of weird stuff with that.
The one thing I was thinking a lot about is just the remakes also. Because there's Ocarina of Time, but there's also Ocarina of Time 3D. So, like, which one of those are we really going on? But, like, I mean, I also, are we ranking these, like, by the which ones we like the most, or are we just sort of like...
Man, Listen, I don't care at this point. I just want to hear what you think about every single one.
Okay.
And just throw them all out there.
I definitely have a favorite. I won't throw that one out right off the bat, but maybe we just start early. I think it would be hard personally for me. I mean, I'll do it if you want, but it would be hard for me to rank them like best to worst, because I mean, like we were discussing this a little bit before we started. Like, how do you rank like Zelda for the NES versus like Wind Waker? Like, how do you compare those? They're like, you know, is it really a fair comparison?
We can try.
We can try. I mean, I'm always up for a challenge.
Here's the tricky thing, because there's a difference between the Zelda, like, promotional art, like, in the instruction manual, all that stuff, even like the box arts, all that stuff, compared to the actual in-game thing. So the actual in-game Zelda 1 art style, I think looks a little stinky. It just, it's like that old school, like it's before a lot of NES games kind of got their character. They all kind of look like they were cut from the same cloth. When I think like an NES game with character, I think like Mario 3 or something, where it's just like that has more of a distinct art style with its sprites. Zelda 1 looks like half of that stuff could have been from Mario 1, from Clu Clu Land, from any NES game from from the early days.
I think that's fair.
The game itself, meh, whatever.
It's funny that you bring up the concept art too, because that was something I was thinking of. What is it? What I say? What is it? Is if I don't have it right here, the Zelda arts and artifacts. I was like looking through this.
I have that one too
in preparation, and I mean, I'd obviously looked through it before. I think I'd talked about it once before at some point, but I wanted to revisit the concept art, because the concept art, I can't really disagree too much with what you're saying about the actual game, but the concept art is so cool. I really love it. I would love to see an actual like Zelda game with an accurate concept art graphic style. That would be so cool. And one of my favorite things about it is how like scary the enemies are. Like the enemies are terrifying looking in the concept art. Like they're genuinely like fearful. Like Link is standing there like, and there's like some enemy just like 20 times his size, and in the game they're exactly the same size, and you just boop, and you kill him with one hit. But in the concept art, it's like, oh my god, like he's about to get devoured by this like giant crab guy. Like, what is happening? Especially in comparison to Link himself, who just looks kind of like a little goober. Like, and then these like terrifying monsters. It's just very interesting.
It's very interesting because when you said I want a whole game that's made out of that, like that made me think like something that I've kind of wanted for a bit is like how they did a remake of like Metroid 1 on the GBA. I would love to see something like that for Zelda 1, because it's like timeless and as a game as Zelda 1 is. And I played through it and I'm like, okay, I respect the hell out of this game, but at the same time, like, I would like to see it redone a bit and just kind of like brought up to modern standards. And if they actually like take that like artwork and translate that over to the actual game, I think that would look super cool. But I think that this artwork really does kind of just make it feel like that much grander of an adventure. I don't know, it feels like something, I don't know, it just feels like an old storybook. I think it's very cool. And I think Zelda 2 has pretty much most of like the same like kind of aesthetic when it comes to like the artwork. The game itself, I mean, like, whatever, who cares again? It has more character than Zelda 1. But,
the side scrolling, you get more of a view of like what Link looks like, as opposed to just kind of the top down like hat and then the sword poking out kind of thing. I never really thought about it before. Like, I don't know why I never thought of them remaking Zelda 1, like they did with Link's Awakening or something. That would probably be a huge deal. I mean, I imagine. Yeah. I think the game itself kind of still stands up by NES standards. I mean, like how you can go anywhere you want to go and you kind of like discover things, and it's sort of a mystery as well as an adventure, like a true adventure game, because you don't really know where you're going or what you're doing.
You know, Zelda 2 is also one I think could be remade. But what do you think about Zelda 2? Because, you know, I mean, like, these old cranky-ass NES games, whatever. But, like, you know, I can play them, and I'm like, you know what? These are respectable. They definitely have their merits. I played through Zelda 2, and I liked it a lot more than I think a lot of other people do. Because it's just interesting. But I will say, in terms of art style, this sprite of Link always, like, I've always seen it in a different way. I thought, let me send this to you. I thought his sword was like his arm, and I thought his shield was the sword. Yeah, I thought he was holding up his sword like this.
Yeah, and even his shield, he is holding like the shield he's holding like the bottom, like he's like, it seems like it would be like falling forward or something. That was what always weirded me out the most about the sprite.
His sword's the same color of his skin.
Yeah, it is. It could be like a silver or something, like to differentiate. Yeah. I guess I never really thought about it that much. But you asked me what I think about Zelda 2. If I'm being perfectly honest, I don't think about Zelda 2 very often. I mean, I wouldn't like directly like.
What do you think about that?
I don't know. I think NES Zelda. If I'm honest, I almost forget about Zelda 2 completely. I'm not gonna say it's like a terrible game or anything. It's just something about it. It's just so different from the other Zelda games, and not really in a good way. I don't know. I've never beaten Zelda 2. I'll just go out and say that. Never.
I haven't beaten it either, but I used a guide and kind of like a bit of rewind on like Nintendo Switch Online, and you could, like, I'm like, I don't care, like, you know, like I just want to get through the experience. And if it's BS, if I'm like, okay, well, this is just gonna be a waste of time to go through, then I'll rewind. I enjoyed it for the most part. I was like, you know what, I see merit to this. But, you know, I'm not really chomping at the bit to finish it or like jump back in.
When I got the little Game & Watch, I definitely did play some Zelda 2. I was diving in there, playing it a little bit, and I was having fun with it, but I kind of reached a certain point where I got, like, I don't know, maybe halfway through the game, I can't remember. And I just had this sort of realization that if this wasn't a Zelda game, I wouldn't play it. Like, if this wasn't attached to the Zelda series, I would never think about it a single time. It's just kind of one of those games for me, and maybe that's not fair. I'm not like shitting on the game or anything, but it's just, I don't know. And the art style, you get a more detailed look at Link, but I mean, is he really looking that great? I mean, again, like you could compare this, like it was a good example of Mario 3. Compare this with this sprite. I don't know. It's just, it's kind of night and day almost.
Link looks like kind of like a dweeb in this game. I'm just gonna be honest. He looks a little like a dweeb, but you know, it's whatever. The regular artwork of Zelda 2, it's a little different from Zelda 1 from what I remember.
He's got a longer nose. I remember that.
Yeah. Well, you know, he's older now. I think it's like a little. I feel like it has like you can see that evolution. I feel like Zelda 1 has a bit of a rougher art style from what I remember, and then like this gets a little more detailed, and then we go into Link to the Past, which gets a little more detailed. But you know, going into Link to the Past, you know, I think this game still looks pretty good. Link has pink hair in game.
Yeah, I always thought that was kind of strange. Yeah, well, it's the only time he's ever had pink hair, right?
Yeah. But, like, in the regular artwork, he doesn't, you know? So it just might be, like, a weird, like, something.
Something happened with the sprite that just never kind of, like, got changed. I don't know.
Yeah, for these sprite-based games, it's kind of hard to discuss them from, like, an art style perspective. But if you have anything to add, I'd love to hear it.
Not really, to be honest. Most of what I had was just about the concept art. Because the concept art I do find genuinely fun to look back on. I mean, I wasn't even planning this, but I have this... It's a little dusty, probably. Need to dust my room. But this Japanese board game, this is gotta be around Zelda 1 and 2. Like, I mean, some of this like art style and the concept art and stuff is like super, like, just fun to look at. It almost makes it like disappointing when you actually play the game and it doesn't look even close to that. I mean, not that they could have possibly pulled that off back then, but you know. And now I just want a Zelda 1 that like remake like on the Switch with the actual concept art. That would be. I never thought about that in my entire life. People think like, oh, then they think about the remakes. They're like, oh well, they did the Link to the Past, or sorry, Link's Awakening. Like, well, maybe they'll do the Oracle games or something like that. I never hear anyone say maybe they'll remake the first game. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll watch this Scott Stash episode and they'll get it in their head.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I think those games are the ones that people actually want, and I feel like a lot of people that really love that original Zelda game are kind of like they're old. They're these old guys that are just
hey,
like
I mean, I had an NES growing up. I wasn't born when it came out, but you know,
I played the NES growing up. I had the NES at my grandma's house, so you know, I experienced the old days. But you know, people that really look back at that first Zelda game and are like, this is one of the best ones. You know, I don't think they really care about it getting remade. They like it as is.
Yeah, your point probably stands pretty well.
But I look back at like the Link to the Past art, and the thing about the art of like these first like 4 Zelda games, you know, we go into Link's Awakening before Ocarina, it feels like they just kind of have like a very similar kind of art style. I look at the Link to the Past art. It's very interesting that like this very much seems like, you know, an older Link, while in game he still looks like a little, like just like a very little guy.
Yeah, he does.
It's very interesting, and of course no pink hair in the artwork.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to bring up this was in my list of the funny ones to talk about. There's the Zelda cartoon, if you want to count that art style. What do you think represents Zelda the best out of Zelda 1, 2, Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, and the Zelda cartoon? Pretty much anything pre-Ocarina of Time, and we can throw the CDI games in there as well.
Oh, geez, you're really throwing me for some loops here. I was not anticipating talking about the Zelda cartoon or CDI. I actually was recently watching a decent chunk of the Zelda cartoon for a video I was working on, so it's fresh on my mind. It looks fine. I mean, I was not expecting the okay, with the little CDI. What do you say about the Zelda CDI art style? I did not prepare for this.
I think, you know what, I'll say this. They put more work into it than they should have.
Yeah.
Like every single frame of those animations, like something's moving. Like,
and they're always
they
like
put
moving,
way too much work into it.
They move back and then they move forward and then they're like back again and they're like, it's just like, what is the depth perception on some of these cuts? Is like Link moving back and forth, or were they trying to go for some kind of like 3D look or something? I'm not sure.
I will say, in terms of like the most definitive, I mean, not definitive, but I will say in terms of like the most vibey art style, how about that? The most vibey art style, I think you gotta hand it to like Link, the Faces of Evil, and Zelda Wand of Gamelon. In terms of like an art style, you gotta look at it and you're like, this transports me to a completely different world. This is different.
It is a little trippy almost, in kind of a good way. I mean, I have like a soft spot for the CDI games in my heart, because I think it's mostly, you know, if you ever do a video about like a bad game, and then, you know, once you're done with the video and, you know, you had fun making the video, so you kind of look back on those games like fondly. So I feel like my perception of the CDI games is a little warped due to the fact that I had fun making videos about them. I sometimes forget how much fun I was not having when I actually was playing the game, that part of the game. I mean, the graphics on those games are not that bad or anything. I mean, there's a very drastic change between the cutscenes and the actual backdrop art and stuff.
Yeah, but what about Zelda's Adventure, the third one that's like all FMV stuff?
That one is ugly, dude. It is a mess. There's parts where you can't even really tell. I mean, literally, I remember there was one character in the game. I didn't realize it was a character until it started moving. It was like a woman laying on a couch or something. She looked like just like a giant fish or something. And I was like, "What is this? Someone like catch this fish and like put it." And then all of a sudden, I started talking to her. She's just like waddling around. It's so the Triforce. It's like, what am I looking at right now? It is genuinely hard to tell at certain points.
Well, Zelda's huge in these games. Like, I'm looking at screenshots, and like she's bigger than the trees. You know, it's kind of hard because it's just like, what even is an art style in this? Because it's just like this is all like whatever, like regular people. Or like digitized, like Mortal Kombat style.
Yeah,
stuff,
I was gonna
like
say Mortal Kombat. It kind of looks like a little bit. You mentioned in Zelda 2 though, like how it was hard to tell He's holding the sword and like he's holding the shield funny. Another thing about that game, about Zelda's Adventure, is that her weapon is not a sword. It is a wand. But if it was never mentioned at the start that it was a wand, it's just a sword. Like she just swings it like a sword throughout the entire game. It's a wand though. She's a girl. She can't use a sword. She needs a wand. She just beats everyone to death with this wand instead. Or maybe it's because she's like a princess, so she has her like royal scepter. Maybe it's more of like a wand, like a scepter. I don't know. But if I recall, she never shoots anything out of it. It's just a beating stick.
Does she have a sword in like the Wanda Gamelon game?
Yeah, in the second one she has a sword. Yeah,
that has a wand.
Where does her sword go? Yeah, where does her sword go between 2 and 3? I never even thought about that. Yeah. I almost forgot the freaking real life cutscenes. What do you call them? That video, old video cutscenes. It has
FMV,
that
whatever,
FMV.
yeah.
Yes, it has FMV cutscenes. They're pretty early, like heavy loaded at the front of the game, so I don't think you see them that much throughout. But
I think a couple times it's just a slideshow or something.
Yeah.
I believe, yeah. So I don't even know if that's considered an art style rather than just a style.
Just a style, yeah.
Yeah, but live action Zelda, you know. Oof.
Hey, so we're getting one apparently. I'm not so sure if we want to go down that tangent, but considering we don't even know anything about it, but hopefully it's better than Zelda's Adventure. Let's at least say that much.
I've kind of thought like if you wanted to take Zelda and make it like as big this huge movie franchise kind of thing, like Lord of the Rings was, you know, back in like the 2000s, like you could definitely do that. And that's why like originally before, like I thought like, oh yeah, live action Zelda, that would probably make sense. But then, you know, like actually now the one has been like announced, I'm kind of like, yeah, but Zelda isn't real. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I think animated, animated would just feel like it would fit like a little better in terms of like the actual series, because as we're gonna get into the series, like I don't know, like the series has been dark. You know, Zelda is consistently like, you know, has dark themes and like dark elements to it. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, like a lot of, you know, like you look at Wind Waker and you look at Skyward Sword, and like the general art style is supposed to be kind of like, you know, like a very like colorful, just like whimsical fantasy world. But they've tried that with like Twilight Princess, but you know, and that's what a lot of people want. But they've only really done it like once with that, you know, and like other elements, you know, you can kind of consider like Majora's Mask to be darker, but that still had the same art style from like Ocarina of Time. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting, but we'll get into that. You know, finally we got Link's Awakening in terms of these crusty old titles. I love the old school Link's Awakening style. The regular artwork, I have like the Japanese box. I got the Japanese version in box, and that's on my shelf over there. And like it actually has like 4 Zelda games in a row or something had the same box art. It's just like the Link to the Past artwork, pretty much.
Yeah, a
it's just that gold and just the logo. But yeah, looking at that artwork again. Pretty much the first few games here use the exact same art style.
I don't know about that. I would actually I think Link's Awakening looks way better than the NES or either of the NES games. I mean, maybe not as good as the Super Nintendo version, but I don't know. I think just the setting of it being on an island, it added, instead of just like, I mean, Zelda 1 is like almost like all in like a desert and everything. I mean, just being on this like tropical island, and you got these interesting looking trees. You've got some actual like grass instead of just the bushes. You kind of got variations in the grass. There's like cutscenes that show different angles of the island with like Marin and Link sitting by the trees and the beach. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then like the dungeons look kind of cool, interesting in Zelda 1, but the dungeon entrances and everything. I don't know. I'm a total just like simp for Link's Awakening though. So I have nothing but praise for that game personally. I think it actually looks pretty good, especially when you have the color version.
To be fair, I was mostly referring to like the promotional artwork and stuff. Like when you look at that, a lot of it is kind of reused from like A Link to the Past. So, like they did kind of kept
that same style of art.
Because in game, I do definitely agree with you. I think like even the old school Game Boy version, like there's just so much more to look at than the NES games. There's so much more to enjoy. It's very, very impressive they were able to fit that all into a Game Boy cart. Like all that whole like, I don't know. It just feels like such a more luscious, like alive, living world. which is interesting considering that it's not a real world, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that kind of moves us into the 3D era with Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. It's interesting, like, there was, like, an extended period of time where there was, like, no Zelda game. I look at this, like, Wikipedia timeline. It's, like, this is, like, the longest they ever went without a Zelda game. It was, like, 4 years or something. 4 or 5 years or something without one. But I got Ocarina of Time. What do you think about this art style? How do you think it represents Zelda?
It definitely, I mean, obviously this was their first 3D game, so it's almost kind of, to me, I feel like the older I get, the more I look at it in a similar way as I do the first NES Zelda game. Not that it's, again, not that it's bad, it just, it's the first one, you know? It's not as clean, and it's not as interesting to look at. I mean, it's sort of bland. There's, like, you know, you go walk out into Hyrule Field, and it's like, there's not really anything there. It's just some grass textures and some trees and things. It's certainly not bad, but if we're talking, and I mean, the game's a classic, but if we're talking just the way it looks visually, you know, it kind of leaves something to be desired a little bit, at least with Ocarina of Time specifically. I do feel like Majora's Mask added a lot more unique, interesting visual styles, and, like, you know, jumping down the into the world, and there's the weird, colorful faces popping up, and then, like, you know, you go to the Deku Scrub Palace, and there, you know, the King Deku, and he says all these colors. I feel there's a lot more colors and interesting things to look at in Majora's Mask, whereas Ocarina of Time, again, classic game, but visually nothing really stands out as, like, that aesthetically pleasing, I guess. I don't know if you would agree.
N64 is kind of like, you know, you have NES, and then SNES is kind of like, oh, you know, like a much better, you know, kind of the perfection of that sprite-based stuff. And then N64 is kind of like you restart all that over, but in the 3D era. You know, like, could have been a model from a lot of the other Nintendo 64 games at the time, you know? Like, it's not as, like, refined or not as unique as, you know, future Zelda games. I think where this game is most unique is, once again, the promotional artwork and everything. I think they have, like, the Ocarina of Time Link amiibo, or they have the Ocarina of Time Link amiibo and, like, Majora's Mask amiibo, and they show kind of like that promotional artwork style that they had with these games, or, like, the cover art style, and outside of, like, North America and Europe, like, the Japanese box arts had the actual character on them and all that. I think it's okay. It's not my favorite. I think it looks a little like, I don't know. They have more of, like, a, you know, I mean, like, this is earlier in the Zelda franchise, so it's not, you know, like, oh man, it's not as refined. Oh man, how could that
it's not
be?
really that surprising. It's, yeah, like you said, it's the first of the 3D games. I personally feel like the strongest visually Ocarina of Time is the darker it is. You kind of hide all those rough edges. Like when you first, like, walk in the Deku Tree boss and fight Goma or whatever, and you look up and it's like all this dark, creepy atmosphere, or like under the well, you know, stuff like that. The scariest, darkest parts of even like towards the end when you're going up to the castle and everything, like, this darker and scarier it is, the better I think it looks visually, which I think is part of why I think Majora's Mask kind of strikes me better as, like, a bit more visually memorable, is because it is a darker, like, visually darker game, and when it does have colors, those colors kind of pop more. But yeah, I think it's just a little rough around the edges, but, like, how would it not have been, you know? As a kid, it was just mind-blowing. Like, absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. But when I look at, like, the 2D artwork, like, a lot of this artwork just makes me uncomfortable, and I don't know I don't know how to explain it, man.
Do you have any examples?
I don't know, man. I just look up Ocarina of Time art style, the picture of, like, Link with Navi sitting on a tree stump. I don't know, man.
Oh yeah,
sometimes I don't know what about it is. It's a fine
like,
piece.
Why is he? Okay, it's a little bit of a weird pose, is what I'll say.
yeah, I didn't notice.
It's a little strange pose.
I noticed the pose is a little strange. But, like, I look at, like, any of the regular artwork. There's just something about it, man, and I don't know how to explain it.
I'm looking at it now that you mention it. I'll screen cap this one. There's, like, this version of adult Link. He does look just kind of weird. Like, the charm of the, like, original concept art for the 2D games, like they actually looked very charming. There's something just kind of off-putting. Maybe part of it is that they're trying to make him look like super cool and like, oh, he's an adult and he's tough and everything. Actually, I mean, like, you know, we're making fun of the Toon or the young Link. Actually, you know, he looks fine. It's not like as weird to me as some of the adult Link art.
Yeah, for sure. I think when you go over to like the Majora's Mask style, like regular, like you know, just like looking at something like that, I think they definitely refined it to a point. I mean, like that there's some like bold shading there and everything. Like I think
that like poster, I have it right up here actually. The poster of like Link and all the it's like super cool. A lot of colors and
yeah, I think they definitely kind of perfected that general kind of Zelda style with Majora's Mask. The Ocarina stuff just makes me feel a little uncomfortable. But Majora's looks pretty good. But then we kind of move into Toon Link era because pretty much after this, I mean, like you have the Oracle games, but those pretty much have like the same like 2D style. I mean, like not like in terms of in-game, but like in-game, it looks very similar graphically to Link's Awakening in terms of like the sprite style. But then like you look at like the box art and the general like outside of the sprite work, it kind of retains like a lot of that Ocarina style from what I remember.
Yeah, Ocarina of Time was super popular, so I'm not that surprised that they kind of kept the promotional art similar.
It might, I think it feels kind of like a mix between Ocarina and A Link to the Past kind of style, I guess.
Yeah, it does look a little bit more toonish, but not quite, like it hasn't quite like moved straight to Toon Link, but like it's the frame in between normal, like regular Link and Toon Link.
I think it makes sense. It feels like it's kind of combining both. But this is a bit more of a unique art style than I initially remember, but I don't really know if there's as much to really talk about with this one unless you want to just go off on this one.
Well, all I can really say is I think this version of Link is probably the most Peter Pan-ish of any of them. Like, he just kind of screams Peter Pan to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I came up with this idea on the fly. In terms of Zelda art styles, there's the GameCube tech demo. If we're going to talk about Wind Waker, I think this counts.
It looks pretty bad, honestly, in hindsight, doesn't it?
Yeah, it looks like garbage, man.
Yeah.
I'm just going to
throw it out there.
It's been a
while since I've looked at it.
Trash.
Yeah, people wanted this. This is what people wanted over Wind Waker.
It's been a while since I've done like research on this because I've definitely talked about this in like videos before, and I've definitely seen like what the response was at the time. I wonder how much this tech demo elicited a genuine like, oh my god response compared to like people just assume like, oh, that's what we're getting. I look at this obviously like back then it's just like this looked incredible, but I wonder like I don't think this elicited the same responses like that Twilight Princess reveal at like E3 2004 where like people were like screaming about that. You know, this was like a 10-second little demo, and it just looks like, I don't know, there's nothing to this one, man.
I mean, it's hindsight's 2020, but yeah, I mean, this was probably one of the most gaslit I've ever felt in my whole life as a kid. Like looking at the Wind Waker trailers and being like, this is so cool, and then everyone's like, this is stupid. I'm just like, wait, what am I? Are we looking at the same thing? Like, this looks so awesome.
I mean, you look at that Space World demo, that reeks of like early PS2, early GameCube, and that was the crustiest stuff. like I don't know, like if I play like a GameCube game from 2002, I feel it, man.
If it was a game that tried to look realistic at the time, yeah. Like pick any like FIFA or Madden game. Like look at like Madden or FIFA 2001. And like see.
I think
what
that's
that
the best way
like.
to describe this demo. It feels directionless in terms of the art style. It's nothing crazy. It just kind of feels like a generic, hey, let's put this is the year 2000's version of like Sonic and Unreal Engine whatever demo a fan puts up, you know, like whatever, like, oh man, look at how crazy this is. It's just like it doesn't have anything to it. It's just whatever. But that brings us into Wind Waker, obviously one of the most controversial titles at the time, but
at the time,
yeah, you know, it's crazy. This art style is literally like the most used like Zelda art style, even when it's just like it's used like I think it's used randomly in like Triforce Heroes. Just randomly pops up there. I think that was the last time we got it.
Well, it was always on handheld after that, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure it was exclusively on handheld after Wind Waker. Yeah, my favorite by far. I mean, specifically for Wind Waker, I don't have like crazy affection for most of the other Toon Link games, the handheld ones. Not that I dislike them necessarily, but the Wind Waker is by far my favorite. It looks as good as it did when I was a kid, and I don't think I can say that for any other game, any other Zelda game that's even like a few years old. It just looks just as good. It aged insanely well. Like, it's kind of weird that they remade it with this sort of like new art style. Not that I dislike the Wii U version, but it's kind of weird that that's the one they decided to remake when it already looked so good to begin with. But
yeah, that's what I thought, because I went through it again recently, and my thought was exactly that. Where when the HD version like was released, and it was like, oh my god, like. This game looks incredible. They did such an amazing job on this HD remaster. But
it's
then
because it already looked good. It already was good, though. That's why it was so good.
In some cases, Wind Waker HD, I don't think looks as good.
Yeah,
I think they overdo it on the bloom, and they have like a weirder like gradient.
Everything's softer edges and everything.
Yeah, which I mean, like I think HD has higher highs, but lower lows. I think the GameCube original is very consistent across the board. It has a very deliberate art style.
Yeah.
Like very, very harsh shadows where it's just like it's a cartoon, you know, like it's just a very like deliberate shadow. But then in the Wii U one, it's just very, like you said, softer edges and everything. I think they're both good though. I like
both of them. There's definitely some improvements in the Wii U version. It's just, I don't think the graphics are necessarily the strongest suit. This like some control things here and there, and then gathering all the Triforce pieces is better or worse. I think it's kind of overblown how it is in the GameCube version, but you know, you could make that argument. Visually, you know, they could have just like made it a little sharper, you know, up the resolution. Man, I would kill if you could just switch, like toggle on and off like the original graphics and the newer version. That would be insane. But you know, it's not a bad remake by any means.
No, and I think Wind Waker is like, I think how you put it, like you know, it's your favorite art style for Wind Waker specifically. I do think this art style really peaked with Wind Waker, because to be fair, I mean, like it then shows up in like a lot of handheld games, and I feel like it's more so just kind of like they're just kind of like, this is the de facto kind of like quirky Zelda art style.
Yeah.
We're gonna do different stuff elsewhere. Where it's just like I kind of wish I saw another game with that Toon Link style where it really feels like it's designed around it. I feel or like kind of like it's like, I don't know if designed around it's the best word, but like you can't imagine Wind Waker without that art style. I could imagine like Spirit Tracks without that art style or something.
Yeah,
you know?
I think that's fair.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think I do think this is like, I don't know. Could you imagine every Zelda game with this art style?
Not really. No.
Yeah, I think it's very, very specific to.
It's that island and the ocean and everything. Yeah, it's like it's very catered to that sort of like tropical type of feel. I think there was one thing. This was not like part of any kind of preparation. It was just a couple nights ago. I was falling asleep, or I was about to fall asleep, and I was looking like for some kind of like, you know, ambiance or like ASMR or something, and something popped up was like Wind Waker ambiance. And there's a couple different Wind Waker ambiance videos I found that are super nice, and like I'll leave them on. There's like the oceans moving and the visuals or whatever. It's just super, it's pleasing, aesthetically pleasing all around. And then later on, the next like couple days, I saw another one. It's like, oh, here's a Majora's Mask one. It's like, oh, I love Majora's Mask. Let me put on Majora's Mask. And it's like the Zora Cove or whatever you call it, the ocean area in the game. And I'm just like, huh. This vibe is just not doing it for me. Like, to sleep, it's just not doing it for me. Like, obviously a lot of that is the sound design. Wind Waker's has insanely good sound design. Like, inside the submarines, you can hear the creaking in the water and everything. That's largely it for its ambiance. But even just visually, I'm looking at Wind Waker and it's like, oh man, I can fall asleep to this super like pleasing vibes. And then, you know, in Majora's Mask, it's just like, you know, nothing's really moving. It's just kind of still and everything. It's just kind of there. It's like, I don't know. I just had that realization as I was like, oh, maybe that's something worth bringing up. If it's not good as ASMR, then can you really call it a good art style? I mean, come on.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the main thing about Wind Waker is that this is the first Zelda game out of like the whole lineup now where I would say has a very deliberate art style. The other ones kind of feel like they're kind of just like, it's just that's how the game looks, and I'm just saying like that from like if I was just playing these games and you were telling me like what's art style the best, I wouldn't be able to tell you a damn thing between like any of them before Wind Waker.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just like, yeah, they have their own art styles.
And they're perfectly serviceable. But you don't
I'm not
remember
trying
it
to
because of
downplay
that.
the art design, you know.
Yeah, you don't remember the Zelda games prior to this because of the art style. You remember for other things like
and
before that.
if all the Zelda games kind of continued with these these general aesthetics, I don't really think you'd consider it to be like you know, we'd have that discussion of like, oh, which Zelda art style is the best? You know,
we
like,
wouldn't even be talking about it. Probably we would not be doing this video right now.
Nah. So I would say Wind Waker is up there right now. It's the nicest to look at, just the nicest to just. I can look at the GameCube one right now and just be like awestruck that that's on the GameCube. It looks so good. And the Wind Waker HD is just so fun to just kind of like look at, see like all the, I don't know, it's just nice to see that game in a higher resolution and just all nice and pretty too, even if it has some downsides. But you know, that kind of brings us to a couple of the other Toon Link games. You know, there's also Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures.
Yeah, well, that is a console game. I didn't really consider that as part of Toon Link, but I didn't really think about it.
That is true, but it's kind of half and half though. I mean, you kind of use Game Boys for it, and it's a sequel to a Game Boy.
It's more like the promotional art is more Toon Link, but the actual gameplay art is kind of a mash between Wind Waker and like Link to the Past or something.
Yeah, it's like a Link to the Past, but then you have like a lot of Wind Waker-esque element. It's kind of like a Wind Waker, but in 2D. I don't know. I mean, like the explosions are very Wind Waker.
Yeah,
you know,
they look.
like,
I do specifically remember the explosions looking really good in this game.
It's a weird little creepy game, man. I look at this game and I'm just like, they were doing these Super Nintendo throwbacks on the GameCube, and you kind of forget about it, you know?
Yeah, I didn't even think about Four Swords when I was thinking about this video. Yeah, it looks amazingly like Link to the Past now that I'm like looking at it again. It's like Link to the Past, but Toon Link is in it.
And it's weird because this was like before like that retro throwback boom and like the Xbox 360 era, you know, where like all these Xbox Live Arcade games are coming back and like Mega Man 9 and all that stuff, you know, like this is before that. It's weird because like back then it was very much like, oh, 2D games are for the handheld, 3D games are on the console, and like this was kind of an example like, no, here's a new console 2D Zelda game, even though it was kind of, you know, more of a
spin-off.
An offshoot kind of thing. I always thought this game looked kind of neat. I mean, I have to look at gameplay again because I'm gonna shoot myself in the foot if I say this game looks really nice, but then it turns out like it kind of looks a little muddy and gross. I think a problem is like a lot of the like they zoom in a lot and you just see kind of like this chunkier, blurrier pixel art, I guess. I don't know, like I'm looking at my gameplay. It kind of looks like weird, like photoshopped, blurry pixel art.
Yeah, like it had a like a Instagram filter put over it or something.
Yeah, but in action when you're playing it, it looks fine. And like I think on an old TV, it looks much better. You know,
the Wind Waker art style added into Link to the Past actually looks surprisingly good. The fire and the lighting and stuff like that. The water splashes. Yeah, it actually does look pretty good. I never really thought about the art style of Four Swords. Another Zelda game that I just don't think all that much about, because I mean I never had 4 people to play it with, much less 4 like Game Boy Advance cables. So I never really played very much of it. I remember me and my brother like rented it or something at one point. That was pretty much it.
Well, it's a nightmare to set that stuff up, man. I mean, like even just trying to like I played like Four Swords Adventures once. And by the time it's finally ready, like I'm ready to put bed, you know? It's not worth it. But yeah, I mean that kind of translates over to like Minish Cap. Minish Cap has a very similar look to like this, you know, you have kind of like Toon Link style.
It more leans into the Wind Waker style than Link to the Past for sure.
Yeah, and I would say that's like the best looking 2D Zelda at that point. Like you know, just in terms of the pixel art visually, like I think it looks great.
Yeah, it's very cutesy. There's a lot of character emotes, like, you know, I remember like Zelda at the beginning of the game. Like there's a lot of personality in the animations and stuff.
Yeah, but listen, man, I kind of want to throw you. I mean, like, and there's the other Toon Link games, you know, Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks. Those got that funny little DS funk.
Yeah, it kind of looks strange. Like,
yeah,
Link's head is kind of like circular. I remember looking very circular. His head is that? Am I crazy? It's like his head is like a circle. It's like a ball. That's how I'm remembering it.
Yeah, it's kind of like an egg on its side or something.
Yeah.
It's like a ball, but it's like a little flatter. I think I don't know. Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's definitely cool for the DS at the time because it's kind of like, oh, it's a 3D Zelda, but it's top down and still 2D. Blah blah blah. But I kind of want to throw a funny little curveball at you. What about this Zelda art style? All right. Apparently, like about 10 years ago, a movie studio pitched to Nintendo a Zelda CGI movie. We got the Zelda movie pitch art style. There you go.
Remember this?
It's done by the studio behind TMNT and Astro Boy.
Huh.
And you can see how Ganondorf looks in this, which is a little silly.
The characters look not great, but everything else looks really good. like the backgrounds and the castle and everything looks pretty dope, but like, you know, Zelda looks okay.
Ganondorf's a funny-looking guy, man.
I haven't seen Ganondorf yet. Where is he? Oh, yeah, here he is. Oh, and Link looks terrible. Yeah, Ganondorf has such a Chad-like chin. I don't love the character designs, but everything else looks good. Which, I mean, the character design is probably the most important thing in an art style like this, especially for a cartoon. But I will say that I like the way the temples and everything. There's not a lot of color, but like the temples and the backdrops look all pretty good. But yeah, the character designs, I don't know.
Yeah, I'll be fair to the studio since this was like a pitch that was declined by Nintendo. I feel like an actual movie would at least look a little better. But I feel like this is kind of their general like art style from what I've seen of this like studio. They did like the 2007 Ninja Turtles movie, Astro Boy. This looks like the B grade animated movie from 2007 art style.
Yeah, it's not terrible, but
yeah, it's not my favorite thing. I'm very happy they declined, but you know, I'm not gonna say it looks like oh my god, this looks horrible. But I feel like this was a 55% on Rotten Tomatoes waiting to happen, you know?
That's probably the best way you could possibly describe it.
Yeah, if it came out actually in that era, 55% on Rotten Tomatoes, probably 80 million at the box office. Might have made a profit, but not a crazy profit. And then they put like a TV show tie-in on like WB Kids or something. I don't know. That's what this gives me the vibe of.
10 years later, people like us would be making videos criticizing it.
Yeah, and how it's kind of like, oh, do you remember the Zelda movie? Or, you know, like,
and that's when you drop your 58% on Rotten Tomatoes line, and then you get some likes on the video from that one, and you know.
You know, I'll bring it down to 45%. I feel like it's a 45%er. Yeah, but that kind of brings us to Twilight Princess. Which is definitely an interesting one to kind of look back at these days, because like back in the day, this was like, you know, this is everything anybody ever wanted from Zelda. And when I look at this game these days, I feel like Twilight Princess is kind of like this go-to. If you ask for like the ultimate Zelda game, like traditional Zelda game, I feel like it'd be Twilight Princess with just like how many dungeons there are in it.
Yeah.
You know, you have kind of like, it feels like Ocarina of Time, but supercharged. And, you know, I'm okay with like a darker tone and kind of a more mature more adult looking art style, grittier art style for Zelda. And I think this game did it right. You know, it's not like it's like, oh my God, just like the grittiest thing of all time. It's just more of like a darker, feels very like Lord of the Rings-esque, you know? But with that being said, it's not my favorite, and I'm happy that they didn't like go forward with this all the way. But what do you think about this looking back at it all?
I was kind of notorious for a little while, and rightfully so, criticized for my Twilight Princess takes back in the day. Because for some reason when because I went over how much I liked Wind Waker. We're listing off so many Zelda names. I just keep saying, like, trying to pick out which one I'm talking about. Well, I was such a huge fan of Wind Waker that I was kind of bummed that all the people that were criticizing it won out, and Twilight Princess like became this more darker, more adult-looking game. So I was very like biased against Twilight Princess when it came out, and I was very like butthurt about it. And so that kind of carried on into like some of my earlier videos. I have since replayed this game a few different times. It's honestly one of my favorite Zelda games now. It's like maybe in my top 3. Honestly, it might be 3 for me if I had to rank it right now. It's like some of the best dungeons in the game. Probably the best dungeons. There's a lot of like positive things I could list about it, but like the art style, you know, it's serviceable. It's like it's just so dark and like there's not a lot of bright colors. I mean, I'm not saying it should have gone like quite as far as like Skyward Sword did, but it's just a little. It's like it's in the very gray era, like when all the video games were kind of gray. You know, it has a lot of that going on, where even the grass and the trees don't really look very green. So I'm not like a huge fan of that, but it did fit the kind of theming of the game. You know, it's not like I can really. It's not like a negative. I wouldn't say, wow, it's a bad art style. I hate it. It's just kind of serviceable for what the game was going for.
At the time, like I think it looked. I mean, it's a little rough because like this launched right alongside like the PS3, and this was a year into the Xbox 360. But those consoles were still in like growing pains era. Like if you look at like an HD game on those consoles, like back then. Like you look at whatever, like Call of Duty 2 on the Xbox 360. It looks like an Xbox, an original Xbox game, but like whatever in 720p.
This game was originally developed for the GameCube, also. Not that the Wii was that much more powerful than the GameCube or anything, but it was originally developed for the GameCube.
But I think at the time it was definitely up to snuff, and I think it definitely art design wise, like it's great.
A lot of the character designs are really good. Like Midna, I love the way Midna looks.
Everything it goes for, I think it succeeds at. The problem is it just doesn't age as well as something like a Wind Waker, or even looking at like a Skyward Sword or something.
It's not stylized as much.
It's trying to be more realistic in 2006, and then when you look at like the HD version, that was kind of my problem with the HD version. I remember when that was first announced, I was waiting for like they play a trailer in like a Nintendo Direct. And I was waiting for it to like do and now it looks like this thing, I was kind of like, when is that gonna happen? Because like it looks how you remember it does, That's kind of like the Ocarina 3D thing.
Why did they change the way Wind Waker looked, but keep Twilight Princess exactly the same? I don't get that at all. Like, what is up with that choice?
Yeah. But to be fair, they did. I feel like they did more work in Twilight Princess HD than they did in Wind Waker HD in terms of like the update and the remaster. The problem is the core of Twilight Princess is just it doesn't age as well. So it's you got to put more work in for a game that's not going to even look as good as Wind Waker HD did. But I respect Twilight Princess HD a lot more these days. I think Twilight Princess is perfectly fine. It has more of a style than I would say Ocarina of Time did, or like the early era of Zelda. Like I would take this over Ocarina of Time's art style. But the problem is, I don't know. Would you want like a modern Zelda game with this art style, but it's with modern quality visuals? Like it's this art style, like this darker tone, like Link. This darker world, because like if I look at Twilight Princess HD, I look like the mountain ranges and like the geography of the world, and it's just like it's so like whatever kind of chunky. It's still GameCube-esque. Like
it's very flat,
you have
flat or a mountain. There's like very little in between.
Like you have modern day quality visuals, but with the style.
Not to dodge the question too much, but it would kind of depend on what the overall vibe of the game was. Like if they were they were going for a really like kind of gritty, like darker style of game, then I could see it fitting. I still would like a little bit more like creativity in the world design, and like as far as the character designs in Twilight Princess, I think they all look great. I love the character designs. I love the way Zelda looks. Link looks really, really good in this game, especially when you kind of compare him to how dorky he looks in Skyward Sword. All the character designs look really good. It's just the world itself that's kind of boring at times. Like if they did more with that, like if it kind of looked, if they made it more like Breath of the Wild, like you said, lots of mountains and hills and trees and different things like to look at, I think that would make it a lot more visually appealing. While if it with this art style still kind of intact. But it would kind of depend on what kind of vibe they were going for with the overall theming. Because I feel like that's the best art styles for Zelda just fit the theme and the vibe of the specific game they're going for, like Wind Waker with the toon art style.
Like you said, it does depend on the vibe, and that's the thing, I couldn't imagine Skyward Sword with a Twilight Princess art style.
Yeah, that would be really
Twilight
weird.
Princess with a Skyward Sword art style, I think that's what's really cool about the Zelda games and how they all have these different styles. And I think it's weird that Twilight Princess's style maintained and was featured in Link's crossbow training. That works. It's a bit of a silly little game to do that with.
We'd be remiss to not bring up crossbow training, of course.
Or the Tingle games too. There are the Tingle games.
That's fair. That's fair.
I don't really remember the art style of those. I feel like they're a little wacky.
Just trippy and very strange. Like, they'll do these close-ups of characters and they just look like insane. Another game where it goes with the vibe of the game. It's like super trippy, weird vibe that they're going for, and the character designs definitely match that. I've only played the first one, but I'm pretty sure the second two are fairly similar.
You know, we already kind of talked about the DS games a bit there. So that kind of brings us into the Wii. Well, I mean, we're already in the Wii, but the Wii's own Zelda game to call its own.
Yes.
We have Skyward Sword, which I feel like could go either way. You know, I'd like to hear your thoughts on here. I know you already you're not a big fan of Link's silly little face in this game.
Not that I dislike the way he looks. It's just, I don't know. He looks kind of like a dork. He's the dorkiest looking Link in any of the games. What I love the most about Skyward Sword's art style, it's kind of similar to Wind Waker in that it's the environment. It's like in Wind Waker, you're on the ocean, you're on the beach, you're on a lot of islands, tropical stuff like that. In Skyward Sword, you're in the sky. So there's a lot of like beautiful blues and whites. There's a lot like very high saturated colors. It's, you know, very, very unlike Twilight Princess. I feel like they kind of went the exact opposite direction. Like, well, what if we just make all the colors really pop? Even in like Skyloft, there's like these little flags and things with different colors, like across the bazaar or whatever. Like all the colors pop so well. I really like that. Now, there's certain areas of the game that are just kind of boring. Like, 'cause you just go to a desert, and then, okay, well, it's a desert. The color of the sand is really popping, but that's mostly all you're seeing. You know, you go to the forest area, and okay, well, it's a forest. So it's like, I feel like the art style I feel like the whole game is the best parts of the game are in Skyloft, personally. I just like to be in Skyloft. I wish the whole game took place there. It has highs and lows, I feel like. And it all kind of depends on less so the art style, which I like, and more so the design of the areas that you're in. And the dungeons mostly look good, I think.
I think this art style is so, like, it is the most, like, painterly of any of the Zelda art styles so far. Especially in the promotional artwork, like when you look like this was, and like they continued this with Breath of the Wild, how you can just see all the brush strokes. And I feel like this is way more pronounced in the original Wii version. Like if you look in like the distance with like the lower resolution, it almost looks like how like, you know, you go to like you look at some like paintings and like in the you know, if they want to paint like a building in the distance or something in the distance, you know, it starts to kind of like, they might just kind of like use like a paintbrush and kind of like whatever dot it,
Bob
you know?
Yeah, like a Bob Ross kind of thing.
And I think it's really pronounced with the lower resolution, because I'm not seeing it as much with the HD version.
Yeah, sometimes when you up the resolution, it can kind of mess up the stylistic part. I mean, like that happens with the like Silent Hill remakes, where it's like, well, the whole point was that it was kind of foggy, and now you can kind of see everything. It kind of messes it up.
Yeah,
some of that artistic vision can be lost in the upscaling.
But yeah, stuff in the distance kind of makes it feel even more like a painting.
It really does.
But I don't think like as a whole, that's what, like if I look at something like a Little Big Planet or something, like that whole game is supposed to be like, oh, it's made up of arts and crafts stuff and felt and all that. I never really look at this when I'm playing it. I'm not like, oh man, I'm playing a painting.
Yeah, it's not quite that intentional.
Yeah, it's a bit subtle. And part of me kind of wishes that the whole game kind of had like that, I don't know, that style that like, because the artwork of Skyward Sword looks really good. Like if you look at like the box art and all that and everything, I kind of wish like it almost looked like I was playing directly that, and it feels like I'm playing like 60-70% what that art style is representing sometimes.
Yeah, like if they had just gone all out with it, it could have been something really special. Instead, it's a little bit muted. I can see that point for sure.
What do you prefer? Would you prefer this to Twilight Princess?
If we're talking just the art style, I do think I like Skyward Sword better, but I have a tendency to like bright colors and things like that when it comes to art styles. I mean, I liked Wind Waker right away when so many people were like hating on it for being too cartoony and childish looking. So that's kind of my bias, is that sort of colorful look. I wouldn't pick Skyward Sword as a game over Twilight Princess, but I would pick the art style. And again, I wouldn't pick the Skyward Sword art style for Twilight Princess. I don't think it would be. It would just be weird. But, you know, if we're just going solely the art style and that's it, I would pick Skyward Sword.
I've always thought Skyward Sword looks good. I think I need to discuss the last couple games before I figure out where it lies for me. I don't know. This is tricky. Well, we have a Link Between Worlds. I always liked how this game looked. I thought it looked cute. Like the paintings at the beginning of Wind Waker pretty much has like the wall Link. I always loved that style in A Link Between Worlds, and I think it looks good. You know, it is a bit generic, kind of like New Super Mario Brothers style for Zelda, but you know, it wasn't overused, and I think it looks cute. You know, it's a fun little game.
It's hard to think about the art style without just thinking about Link going into the wall and becoming like the moving painting, and how like low frame he is while he's moving. It really does just feel like a moving painting, and he still seems so expressive, even though he's like a flat drawing at that point.
I think early artwork of the game, they showed like early artwork that had like a different version of Link. Like it almost looked like a different version of like the Link to the Past Link, and then they redid it. I don't want to look.
This is just something you dreamed, Scott. This is like you're just imagining this.
It happened. All right. Here it is. Okay.
I do remember seeing this like first image. Now it's like it's like super unlocking a memory for me now. It's definitely weird. A very pretty drastic. It's a conspiracy, is what it is.
It is. That's what it is. Or it's just like they based it so much on A Link to the Past, because that is like a direct tracing of like A Link to the Past Link, and then they were like, oh, we'll give it its own vibe. So it's just like that's the Link in the second one.
I personally prefer the idea that it's just a Berenstain Bears type thing memory with you, and that it's not actually, it's like some other dimension or something.
I'm freaking out here. This is what ends me here, is the Link Between Worlds conspiracy.
Scott, you just posted the same picture to me. This is literally the same picture twice. I don't know what you're talking about.
What? I think
are you going crazy over there?
I just always thought that was pretty interesting, but that pretty much brings us to, I mean, what? There's Hyrule Warriors. I mean, oh man, there's Hyrule Warriors and the Zelda Wii U tech demo, which are kind of similar. The Zelda Wii U tech demo was like the Space World tech demo all over again. If the actual Zelda game looked like that would be stupid. That looked like,
I remember it looking really good, but let me look at it again. It's been a while.
Graphically, it looked really good, but I think art style wise, it looks so like it just tech demo-y, you know, like something that's just like
for sure. This is not designed around any specific game. The Goma looks pretty cool. Link himself looks kind of strange, like not something's like slightly.
I don't think
off
we've
about
ever
him.
seen a Nintendo game that reached that graphical fidelity yet, and now it's supposed to be like, yeah, this is what a Wii U game can look like.
Yeah, maybe if it takes place in that one palace room and that's it. Yeah, maybe then it could.
It all looked just so artificial to me. I don't know why. Like Link's hair and everything. It just looks so like artificial, I think is the best way to describe it, which is weird saying a video game looks artificial.
Almost like they ran like what a Zelda AI and like what it thinks it would look like.
Yeah, or like you took like a Link statue from like the Nintendo store and he was the one not saying he's like stiff like that, but just like I don't know, it's all in like the hair and the face for me, man. It just doesn't look as like just doesn't look like a real game, and it wasn't.
That's probably for a good reason. It probably was literally animated. It wasn't even actually gameplay, I don't think. I mean, none of those tech demo, like the original the GameCube tech demo wasn't. I remember that for sure.
It was a tech demo in the sense that like you could control the lighting, which in the camera angle, which proved that it was in real time, but that was it. And it's just like, okay, it's in real time, but also the whole game
then let us control it then. If it's so real time, let's move it around.
Like, it's just like, sure, the Wii U's pumping this out, but it's also like it doesn't have anything else to worry about other than just like playing this exact 20-second animation loop over and over again. But I think technically like the closest thing we got to that was Hyrule Warriors. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have many strong feelings about this art style since it's such like a non-canon spin-off. You know, like I think it does the job for being like a grittier Warriors Zelda game that has to encompass a lot of different Zelda games, like with its characters and stuff. And I think it did a good job. I think some character redesigns looked pretty cool. Like the Ganondorf in this game looked funny and interesting, just with like how he had like the longest damn hair of all time. I think this definitely kind of like put Impa kind of more in the spotlight than ever before too. There was a lot of stuff this game did that was like, okay, that's cool. It's just the art style has never been like, oh my god, this is the worst thing ever, but it's never been my favorite thing.
Yeah, you're right. It kind of looks a little bit generic, and I think it's because they have to like mix all these different Zelda art styles into it, and like make it fit into one universe in particular. Yeah, it's completely serviceable. I remember the magic effects looked really cool. That's the thing I remember most visually about, like when you do your special moves and you like casting all your spells and stuff. I remember that looked pretty dope. It looks exactly how you would imagine Zelda in a Dynasty Warriors game and nothing else.
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. It's very generic Zelda, I would say. Like if you have to generalize Zelda as anything, I think whatever, sure, Hyrule Warriors does a fine job of that. Or it's kind of like what if you had to draw whatever, like the link they put up in promotional images for like, hey, we have Zelda stuff, you know, you might use like a Hyrule Warriors link, I don't know, you know. I think that's the best way to be like, yep, that's Link. That's him. I think that's like the final two major art styles for Zelda would probably be the Link's Awakening remake and the Breath of the Wild style. Yeah. I think the Link's Awakening remake is really good, though I will debate. I'm kind of like, what does this represent? I'm like, it's kind of weird because it's like, okay, so we're representing like a dream world, but everything's kind of like a toy aesthetic, but it's also not. Like, it doesn't go all the way with it. Sometimes if I overthink this art style, it confuses me, but it looks good, so I don't really care.
I always kind of, the way I visualize it in my head is, I mean, they have that super cool anime opening cutscene, which is, not to go on a tangent, but this is how I wanted, if they were going to make a Zelda show or movie, I wanted it to look like that. Like, just make it like an anime style, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. But, like, you have this sort of anime version of Link at the start and at the end, and then the game looks, like, totally different. And that always feels intentional, unlike the CDI games we were talking about, where the cutscene's just like, okay, why does this cutscene look like this? To me, it had, like, a sort of stylistic meaning. Like, it sort of visually represents the dream world. Like, this is not real. This is something, what is going on here? Yeah, it does look a little bit toyish.
That is.
But to me, it just looks dreamlike.
But it's not real.
Yeah, it's not real. And toys aren't real, so it's like almost like playing with toys in a dream kind of, I don't know. You're right, it's not like on the nose. But, you know, if you don't think about it too hard, it fits stylistically, I think, into just being like a dream world. Like, what's going on here? This is not real.
I think the way you described it was pretty much perfect there, because I didn't really consider it the fact that it's just like, yeah, it's not supposed to be real, but that's the point, you know, like, oh, it looks too toy-like, but it's just like, yeah, it's not supposed to be real. Which, it's unfortunate because, like, you know, I look at this art style and I'm kind of like, man, I would love to see, like, an Oracle, the Oracle games remade in this style, but it also wouldn't stylistically make sense because this is supposed to be like whatever. This is supposed to be Link's Awakening and Dream World kind of thing. They also have like that vignette, kind of like that hazy thing. But also, this is the weird thing about this, because then they had the promotional images, and it's a third different art style. It's one that looks like a Link Between Worlds.
This is like what
What's
my
going on here?
wallpaper is like 90% of the time is this image.
Yeah, it's a great image.
It looks good. Hey, it looks good.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot.
What else can you say?
I have a theory that this remake was planned for like the 3DS. And it was like maybe meant to be like using like the Link Between Worlds style too, or something. And maybe that's where this image kind of came from, because it looks so similar to like promotional images from a Link Between Worlds. But that's 3 different styles in this game. You got the anime style at the beginning and end, which is awesome because it's just like it's like a full adaptation of the Game Boy cutscene, because that also had that same style too. And then, I don't know, I really like it.
Me too.
I'd say it's in, like, top 6 art styles for me.
I probably a little higher, but around that same for me. I just like it, like, we were talking about this a little bit with Skyward Sword. It's like, I like it when they say, hey, this is what we're going for. We're going with this, and we're gonna go all out with it. And it feels like they did that with this one. They didn't, like, you know, like, oh, let's just kind of go halfway and, like, make a little bit, like, stylistic. It's like, no, we're gonna make it look like this sort of cutesy toy, dream-like aesthetic, and we're just gonna go with that.
That brings us to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which look the damn same, so we're just gonna throw them in there. Yeah, so I think these games look good, but I wouldn't say they're my favorite. I'd say I played Tears of the Kingdom for so many hours, I am officially burnt out on this art style. I don't want to see it ever again. At some points, it looks really good. But a lot of the other time in Breath of the Wild, and this is just because like Breath of the Wild encompasses so much so much different terrain and weather and all this stuff. So much of this game is so foggy and just like really like whatever, like cloudy, just really hazy, and I can't like, it's just like, I don't know, it's not very bold. It's not very like, it doesn't pop as much as I'd want it to. Like, the promotional images look amazing. This is like, oh my god, I love how this style looks. And many times the style looks fantastic, especially in like cutscenes and stuff when you have like up close shots of characters and everything. But during the actual gameplay, I think it looks fine. But I kind of want, I'd say I'd prefer a bolder art style. I don't know, what do you think?
I tend to agree. I think you're right. There's some parts that look insanely good. And then other parts where it's like, oh, this is another field. This is another field of grass. It's just not a lot of variation. I mean, the different areas of the world obviously look different. You got snow, you got forest, you got plains, you got whatever. There's some areas that, like, pop a lot. Like, you know, where you find the ghost stag or whatever that's supposed to be a water, I'm pretty sure. Right, I'm right about that? Like that, like certain areas like that where it's like, oh, there's all these beautiful trees and flowers and colors and it just looks really good. And then there's other parts where it's like, yeah, this is an open world game. It's certainly, I wouldn't say it's a generic looking open world game, but it doesn't like stand out, like you said, visually.
Which is weird because like it definitely does take elements from like Skyward Sword. You know, you have a lot of cell shading there,
and clouds, skies, especially in Tears of the Kingdom. There's a lot of the sky up there.
Yeah, it's definitely a very deliberate look, and it doesn't look bad. But sometimes it does. Just how a lot of things, like how everything on the screen is coming together, it doesn't really do it for me. I look at something like a Skyward Sword or a Twilight Princess, and it is just like, what you're looking at is very bold. Breath of the Wild, so much of the time, like I feel like the contrast is like really low. Where it's just like, everything just like...
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there's a lot of games that have kind of copied the art style of Breath of the Wild. I think it's kind of easy to copy. I think that's maybe the best way I can describe it. It's like, you know, there's not a whole lot of Wind Waker like copies that's like, oh wow, this looks exactly like Wind Waker. Or, like, this looks exactly like Skyward Sword. But Breath of the Wild, it's like, yeah, any studio could copy this look.
And you know, I look at a lot of like the promotional artwork and elements of the game, and I definitely understand like how good the game can look and how like how much work goes into like this art style, but I'm definitely done with it. I'm definitely ready to move on.
Yeah, I mean, do you think part of it is just the world is so big, so all the areas, like, it's just like everything's spread out, so there's just a lot of the same look, like spread out over a lot of different real estate?
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely fair, and also like the amount of things that can happen, like, you know, like, you know, all the weather changes, you know, like a lot of times, like, you know, it's raining, so, you know, obviously, like, it's going to be a little blander out, and, or it's like, it's at nighttime or whatever, it's at a weird time of day, or it's really hot, so you get a little steamy, or a lot of dust in the air, sand in the area.
I remember Tears of the Kingdom had a lot of hazy look, like, when the sun's rising or setting, it's like really hazy.
One thing that I really love about this game is these games is the individual blades of grass. That always looks really good when you're kind of going through the field and all of that.
Except for when it slows your Switch down. I don't love, but yeah.
That's worth it for me. I'll take anything for a couple blades of grass. I would say it's not my favorite, but I'm not sure what my least favorite is. Okay, so we've gone through pretty much all of the Zelda art styles. I think we got to pick what's the best, what's the worst. We can go both. I think we know your best.
Definitely Wind Waker for me, yeah.
I'm trying to think. I mean, like, I think Wind Waker is the one that I love the most in terms of, like, I can look at that game at any point and just be, like, awestruck by how it looks.
Yeah, it stands out the most.
Yeah, and it has just such a deliberate style, even, like, the user interface and everything, like, all the elements on screen. It all just correlates with each other so well.
That's another thing I don't like about Breath of the Wild, for the record, is the UI.
I hate that stupid. It's just italicized Arial text.
Yeah, that's all Nintendo does with UI now. Their UI is so boring. Like, I don't know. That's an entire different tangent, but I'm glad you apparently agree with me on that, though. So I feel like anytime I bring that up, people, like, like defend and oh, you're just like whatever. It's like I don't know. It just seems boring.
Okay, so they did it once with Breath of the Wild, but when Tears of the Kingdom started up and it just did the Nintendo Presents The Legend of Zelda.
It's cinematic. It's cinematic, Scott.
It's cinematic.
It's
.11 sized Arial font. Wow.
That's
like,
cinema. That's what cinema is.
I'll take the giant ass Wii remote on the screen of Skyward Sword any day compared to all that. Yeah, it's ridiculous, but I kind of like it. It adds. I look at that like if I look at gameplay, look back at that, man. Oh my god!
I'm not gonna lie. I turned the Wii mode off when I'm playing Skyward Sword. I definitely don't want to look at the Wii mode. I'm not saying we should go back to that. Just have like a really large switch in the corner of the screen that's like half opacity, so you can tell you which buttons to press or whatever.
There's so much.
Yeah, at least it doesn't have that.
Yeah, it's just like Breath of the Wild just really doesn't have any character when it comes to that. It has character, but like not in a lot of the special little ways the other Zelda games have it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say Wind Waker may be the best, which is kind of a boring answer at this point because I feel like the people who hated Wind Waker back in the day, they've all died off.
They're dead now. They just
they've
gone into hiding. They're not to be found.
I don't know how you can look at this game from 2003 on the GameCube and be like, I hate this.
Yeah, point out a game that aged better on the GameCube. You probably could. I mean, Beautiful Joe, maybe, I don't know, something like that. But any of the games you would point out would be super stylized.
Exactly, and I don't know. I mean, I like Skyward Sword.
Parts of it are boring though. I like. There's parts of it that are really strong, and then there's parts of it that are like, I'm in a forest. Okay, this part of it, and you move for another hour. I'm still in a forest.
It does like that in between Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. You know, that's the best way to describe Skyward Sword.
Yeah.
Because like you have a bit more of like obviously an older Link than Wind Waker. Obviously more like in terms of proportions like Twilight Princess Link. You know, you also have like the more cartoony style a little bit of Wind Waker, but it doesn't go all the way in either direction. So I feel like I'm always a little unsatisfied with Skyward Sword. I'd say that's the best way to describe it for me. I like it.
Yeah.
But I think it's always a little unsatisfying.
I mean, I feel like the whole game is, in the art style, is kind of similar to the game, where it has some really high highs and some really low lows.
At least Twilight Princess, it doesn't age as well, but like, man, it goes for it.
Yeah,
it knows what it is.
I like the way Twilight Princess looks. I mean, I don't have like as high of praise for it again because I feel like it really suits the vibe of the game.
But where would Link's Awakening go? That's what I'm kind of wondering.
Which version?
I'd say the remake. Do you prefer the remake to the original in terms of how it? I mean, obviously, I'd assume probably, but not. I mean, I love the original. I love the original. But I mean, if I was gonna replay the game right now, I'd probably play the remake. So I don't want to do the original because like it's just there's so many little things about it. I'm like, this is old Game Boy jank. I don't really want to deal with right now. But it's still it's pretty playable for being an old Game Boy game. That it does a lot for being a Game Boy game.
Yes. Yeah. That's. I mean, honestly, I think it's underrated when it comes to how good of a game it is for the Game Boy, especially when you compare other Game Boy games around that time that it came out. It's actually insane. Yeah. And we didn't even go into how it, sometimes it flips into 2D and different things like that. We didn't. I could have talked more about Link's Awakening, but
Well, you have all the Nintendo cameos in that game. That's pretty silly, which goes along with the Dream stuff. And there's elements of the remake that feel very Clay-like too. I think like in the 2D sections, it kind of looks like a little Clay-like. In the backgrounds and everything.
I'd probably pick, if I had to pick a second, I'd probably go with Link's Awakening / remake.
I think I'll do a safe bet and I'll do Wind Waker as number one, just because like that's the one I can always look at and be like, wow.
Yeah, it seems almost generic to say that at this point, but it's for a reason.
It feels very generic. I feel disappointed in myself.
Yeah, I'd love to come out and be like, you know what, Zelda's Adventure in the CDI. I really like what it was going for, but it's Wind Waker. What are you gonna do?
I'd love to do that. Yeah, I'd love to be able to say that.
I just would love to be contrarian. Why not? But I can't.
But that kind of brings up what's the worst art style, man.
Does Zelda's Adventure count? I won't count that one.
Okay, we can maybe, but like if it doesn't, I think we need a runner-up because I do think overall that is the worst.
I'd say Zelda too. I don't like the way that I don't like the up-down. I hate the up-down look and the 2D side-scrolling part doesn't look that good either.
Yeah, it's a little confusing
like,
because like you have that whole overworld section, and it's just like I don't know. It's just Link is so stupid and tiny in that.
And then
section.
the enemies all look like little weird like dots that are like moving around at you. Like what am I looking at?
Yeah.
It's just like an RPG. Like it just feels like this wasn't necessary. Why couldn't I have some side-scrolling like area to get from here to there? I don't know. Like I feel like that would have been more interesting, especially visually.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well the 2D doesn't look that good either. I'd take Zelda the original over Zelda 2. I mean, in every way, but even visually, I'd take the first one. It's limited, but you know,
it's more iconic. It has more of like distinct, like, yep, this is what this is going for. Because it's just like it doesn't. I mean, it's cool that Zelda 2 changes perspectives, whatever. Like, I'm not going like, oh, if you change perspectives, you're a bad art style. No, but with like Zelda 1, it's so like that is Zelda 1. Even though, like, yeah, it looks like any other NES game at the time, like, that is Zelda 1. Zelda 2 is not as iconic, and it just feels like more of the same from that era of NES. And, yeah, I definitely agree with you there, but I definitely kind of want to have a bit of a more unique opinion when it comes to the worst Zelda art style.
That is the problem, is that Wind Waker as best, Zelda 2 as worst is like, okay, wow, brave. How brave of you to come out and
soul.
Yeah.
The bravest soul.
I'll try to think of a better one.
I'm not a big fan. You know, if I want to go with Hyrule Warriors, I'm not a big fan of how Hyrule Warriors looks overall.
Yeah.
Like in the grand scheme of things, like compared to all these other games, like whatever.
Even Four Swords looks really unique and cool. Like the mix between the Wind Waker and the SNES art style, I kind of really like that approach.
Yeah.
And not like my favorite by any means, but it's unique and it feels interesting. And it just doesn't like some of the ones we went over that to me are the worst are just boring. Even like Ocarina of Time. Again, I don't fault it for this because it was the first 3D Zelda game.
Boring
but it's like,
as hell, man.
It just looks boring. Like there's not a lot. Yeah. There's a few parts of the game you could say look really visually interesting, but for the most part, you know, this could be any other game. If you'd like take out all the characters and put in different characters, it could just be any game.
You know what? We're gonna plagiarize a little bit. I'm gonna look up worst Zelda art style.
Okay, yeah. What are the people saying?
What are the people saying? Well, there's a let's see. Oh, the Kotaku article, every Legend of Zelda visual aesthetic ranked from worst to best. What do they consider to be the worst?
This is definitive. If it's from Kotaku, this has got to be.
Okay, they say the DS games. They say the DS games are
dude,
the
I
worst.
forgot about that. I actually don't like the way those look. Because it kind of murders the GameCube art style. Because it's like kind of looks like that, but it also doesn't. Like even the way Link looks, he's so weird. I can't get over like his head.
It's weird because like they keep reusing the Toon Link style, but like it's never 100% the same. So it's very strange. And they also use it when it just like it really doesn't matter if you use it like in Minish Cap.
Yeah.
Like you know like you don't like you could have put a different Link on the cover and it would have been like, oh, you know, this isn't a Toon Link game because like it doesn't look like Toon Link in game.
I do like the art style of Minish Cap, but your overall point,
I do like Minish Cap.
I think your overall point stands though.
Yeah, because it's just like you have the Toon Link. Toon Link isn't really taken advantage of.
Yeah, exactly. Minish Cap looks good, but it's like it could have been any other art style. It doesn't really feel like it needed to be Toon Link.
Yeah, I think A Link Between Worlds looks cute and I think it looks very clean. But it's also very generic. You know, it's the artwork has a great vibe to it. I love like the promotional artwork, but in game it's just kind of nothing.
Yeah,
it's just kind of like, you know,
Link Between Worlds is a great game, but it's another one of those games where it's like, I don't love it for the art style. The art style could be different and I'd still like the game just as much.
What about one of the funny little Satellaview games? Let me see. There's the Zelda NES remake, the Satellaview, the Super Famicom add-on.
I'm not familiar with this.
Okay, this looks a little dumb. I might go for this one because you're not even playing as Link in this. You're playing as like a Satellaview mascot or something.
Yeah, this doesn't look great.
I mean, it's fine. It's an SNES remake of
I've never even
Zelda
heard of
1.
this, so yeah, it's the worst. Throw it on there. It's the worst one.
I'll just part of me just kind of wants to be like, I'll say it's the worst because it's unique. But I don't think it's actually the worst. It's just kind of whatever.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'd probably agree with you. I think Zelda 2 looks a little silly.
Yeah, I want to be more unique than that, but I do think I have to go with Wind Waker, Zelda 2. And yeah, I will throw the DS Zelda games on there too. Maybe even tied. Because I don't like the way those look, especially the character designs.
I don't like DS aesthetic, man. I'm just going to say it.
I mean, there's definitely some games that I like the look of them on the DS, but...
There are some games, but I think DS games age worse than GBA. Even the 2D stuff, like, I feel like 2D stuff on DS looks a little blurrier than on, like, GBA. Like, on Game Boy Advance, everything's a little crisper. That's just me, though. But, yeah. I'll say Zelda 2 because of his weird little stank arm thing.